I'm really glad to be here, and I think this situation kind of brought us a different kind of opportunity that we can give a talk anytime, and then without the physical distance. So I think I'm really enjoying this, and I'm really happy to be here, and I'm really glad to see Isaac. I think we go way back in our past life. The sense of a camaraderie that we both work at a different studio at the time in New York, working for cultural clients wasn't that cool back then, but we were doing it at a different studio, and I admire Isaac and the studio's work as well at that time. So yeah, I think I'm gonna share my screen and then go through it. 1 second. Share computer sound. Okay, cool. See my screen now. All right. How do I close this? Be a little bit smaller. Great. And thanks for everyone saying hi to me in the chat. I cannot see it now. I need to close it. I'll catch up later. Okay, so yeah, it's hard for me to find this title, and because it's almost like a question for myself that every time I give in a design talk, and you know, what do I talk about when I talking about design or graphic design, especially these professions or this industry, or even the term of design has shifted significantly till today. And so, yeah, let me try this. I'm going to share a few projects with you, and then share some thoughts and references. And so, let's see how this goes. And so, here we are. This is our website. As Isaac mentioned, workshop. So this is the studio I'm running with my business partner, Prem Kushmathy. We're based in New York, and we're doing all kinds of different design. Check it out later on in your spare time. Workshop.com, please. This is a photo of me. To me, it feels like nowadays in the past, when we have a real life or physical life, you go to the lecture and talk, and you see the person, you know, tall, short, what kind of person it is, and how they interact, how they talk. And now all you see is a little square of me with my part of my home. And so I feels like, you know, showing my photo of my parents when I've grown up, with some this kind of milestone of my life. And also it's good for me to look at these things after living in New York for so many years, or United States overall so many years, that like I was born and raised in Taiwan, and then came to United States, came to New York for graduate school in 2005. And I never left. So when I was growing up in a different side of the world at that time, and a lot of things happened, even between my home and the place that I now call home. So 72, 97, 2016, 2019, a lot of kind of historical events happened in the world, and I found it interesting to look in this perspective. So that's me. Then I want to share my work. And so the first project I'm showing here, it's called Garden of Six Seasons, and it's an exhibition identity, exhibition spatial design, and catalog for this independent art space in Hong Kong called Parasite. And so this is a new project, recent completed project that we started work on this in 2019, and then the exhibition opened against the backdrop of the pandemic in 2020, and it's still on view in Hong Kong, and you can go see them if you know, online or virtual, or you can go see them at a certain point. So the title called Garden of Six Seasons is actually taken from the real garden in Kathmandu, Nepal. And it's also another name for this garden is called Garden of the Dreams. And so it was built in Kathmandu, but designed as a Edwardian, like British kind of classic garden. And so with this kind of geometric design, architectural landscape architecture design or garden design, that is almost like a colonial style space being dropped, spaceship dropped into the city of Kathmandu amidst the fabric of the urban fabric. So the exhibition, the curator Cosmin Castina took this title and trying to look at all these works that kind of touching upon artists kind of interested in the subject about the kind of nature organic growth to sort of the restraint or the order of a garden. So plants in a garden, things that grow organically and things that being kind of constructed or designed by human. And so it's an ambitious exhibition. There is more than 50 artists, more than 100 pieces of work in the exhibition. And so ranging from like, the more kind of Chinese ink painting to like indigenous crafts to video works to references image and all that. And so the challenge also, the exhibition is going to be shown in 3 different venues and very different menus. You can see a little bit of very different kind of street view on the other side of the world in Hong Kong. So on the top left, it's the storefront space in the building that Parasite is situated. And so it's like a little storefront space next to a almost like a mom and pop general store. On the right, this is the actual space, the gallery space of Parasite. So it's an industrial building that has this kind of exposed ceilings and beams, and it's a huge space, but it's raw. The bottom part is the newly opened Hong Kong Soho House. So it's in a fancy skyscraper, and then with this kind of raw concrete finish of the wall, but the enclosure or the space is quite refined or well designed. And so 3 different menus, 100 artwork, and talking about quite complex concept or ideas that somewhat kind of in contrast or against each other. So usually our design, our practice, I'm showing a little bit of kind of practical design. Usually we start with a huge Illustrator drawing board. So I'm showing our drawing board. This is done by our very own designer, Eric Price. And so we started usually typographically. So you can see thinking about the typeface, but also the orthography, capital letters or mixed case or center left line, right line, to really think about how do we present or represent the concept through typography. As you can see, we're kind of quite into this idea in the beginning to shorten the title to GO6S, sort of like a secret code. And then, a lot of different kind of design being developed, being explored. You have like more geometric shape with the round and square. We even went a little bit farther that like if it's a trees or plants, it should grow. So it become like almost kind of monster looking graphic. At the end, we kind of more settled down on this direction, just basically found a more kind of direct presentation or direct reflection of the title. So it's one kind of very kind of free form typeface called digestive, and then also the other one that's quite kind of industrial regulated condensed typeface. And so taking from this kind of thinking about this 2 different kind of representation of the title, Chinese and English. And sorry, I forgot to mention in Hong Kong, you do bilingual design. So you have to always think about 2 different languages and then treat them equally for the audience, for different type of audiences. And so we're thinking about like taking this 2 very different look, the logo, and kind of just mix them into one. And so it can be simply cut half and half. We actually, the original idea, we have a different iteration that it can be cut from vertically in the middle or cut in the angle. But at the end, the implementation kind of stay on the just kind of horizontal divisions. And so nowadays we, especially after the global pandemic, a lot of things happens online. So we start to make, all this kind of, instead of a print ad or like, billboard, we actually made a lot of kind of social media assets. So you're looking at like a Instagram promotional post image that using the logo type and then the artwork exhibited in the show. So these are using the work in the exhibition, but we always, in our practice, always like to introduce a little bit more of additional element to the design. So that was the almost like a teaser um, uh, um, social media post, and then this one is more of a it's more of a interpretation of the materials we wanted to use. And so you can see some footage was taken. I'll turn down the voice a little bit. So like you can see the a lot of footage that some of them from the exhibited work, the video work, but a lot of video footage we actually inserted on our own kind of research or selection. So like some enlarged kind of cell kind of footage to vintage Chinese karaoke videos, and so kind of like trying to again, working on top of the content, trying to provide a different layers of a communication. So eventually, the exhibition opened. So this is the storefront space you have seen in when I've shown previously, and so the logo being kind of used repetitively, almost like form some sort of forest looking graphic. And then the space it's all painted in green, and you have this kind of more kind of symmetrical design of hallway. You can walk in between rooms, and the logo, of course, on the title wall. And that's on the Parasite space, and this is in the Soho House. So we're part of the kind of spatial design, and also kind of work with the curator closely to how to position or place all this artwork. And at the end, the catalog. So even it's just kind of exhibition handout in that in terms of definition. But as I mentioned, there's so many artists and so much artwork, so it turned out into almost like a book project. So and kind of going with the same kind of identity or the graphic identity we created in the beginning, kind of take that as a system, apply to the book. So you can see like all the pages have a different layouts, and when this sometimes the artist name gets bigger or sometimes gets smaller, the image gets bigger and all that, just kind of like follow the a kind of basic grid, but you break the grid all the time, just let the content grow. So yeah, so that was a fun project for at least for myself, because it's a challenge project with the immersive amount of content, but also like something that we really can push the idea of the kind of juxtaposition or the contrary, the typography and the graphic representation to a certain extent that actually still showing the artwork, the exhibition curatorial text and artist description quite well. And so moving on to kind of semi-old project, it's a book we designed for Guggenheim Museum called One Hand Clapping. And so this is part of a series of exhibition that taken place in Guggenheim that is featuring on contemporary Chinese art. And so in this nature, even it's publishing, the book was published here in New York, in the United States. They require that to be bilingual. So so half the book is Chinese. So the language need to have both Chinese and English. And so it's a great exhibition. There's featured a total of 6 Chinese artists, and the curatorial premise is about kind of explore the ways of a globalization has shaped the way we think about future. And by showing all this Chinese artist work, you see Samsung Yang here, installation about sound. Here's Cao Fei's work. She made this kind of really immersive videos with all these installations about the JD.com, about the e-commerce happening in China. Another artist, Lin Lin, he had this performance piece that he's dropping a basketball from the rotunda of the Guggenheim Museum, and then there's a drone. The drone is carry the ball and dropping the ball, and he's rolling down the museum while the ball is dropping. And then there's a VR piece at the end that you go into that. You went into that VR space and you see. Jeremy Lin, which is a Chinese Taiwanese NBA players. So a lot of cool, fun things happening. But when we started to, when we got commissioned by the museum to design this book, the curator, Xiao Yu Wen, gave us the same keywords that she gave to the artists. So the 6 artists, while the exhibition showing their work, but also they are commissioned to make new work for the exhibition. And so so we look at all this this keywords, and why quite, you know, there's an interesting kind of entry point about what is future, and you know, is future foreign because you've never seen things that are foreign that kind of look like future. So like, but we kind of at the end try to simplify it to be like, okay, we just wanted to make a book for the future or in the future. So we started to do some sort of research. So we found this kind of funny graphic about, like, you know, in the ancient time, the books look like this, and the future books will like something else. I don't even know what the people are reading, that kind of blue person, who are that kind of blue people. But I think also at the time we go in and thinking about what the future being represented in the pop culture, and will look, and that's also coincidentally that year a lot of Hollywood movie actually it's about they have a movie about stories in the future. And so this was Ghost in the Shell, a remake of Japanese original Japanese stories. And so so this is what they think the future look like. At the time, this very long movie, I don't know if you guys remember, the Blade Runner, the new version. And this is, by the way, this is exactly how I present to the museum when we present the design concepts. You can see a little running headers on the top back in 2017. And also, like, you know, Star Wars, not necessarily in the future, you want to get deep on that, but you know, I think it's about what the future look like being in the pop culture, or the 2001 Space Odyssey. Is also the future the room look like, and looking to more kind of in the Asian context, you know, Wong Kar-wai's movie also have this kind of representation about what future look like. So, I mean, till this point, I don't know if you have recognized, like, you know, all the future kind of look a little bit like the past. You know, like a lot of future things we try to imagine in the future, like it look a little bit old, a little bit ancient, a little bit historical elements being mixed into that. And then so looking at the typographic or typography or design side of future representation, what people think about the future in the 80s kind of would look like this. In the 90s, started to kind of shift a little bit, but become more kind of monolithic and a computer output OCR typeface. You know, eBoys, this is quite, it's a huge, when I was studying graphic design, I was just starting as a young designer. They make everything kind of pixelated, the pixelate cities and illustrations. And then we know in the late 80s, early 90s that the designer, this is showing Emigrant, Susanna Lischko and Rudy Vanderland, trying to fight with the pixels on the computer because the amount of information and then the screen, the monitor can present, it's very limited. And so you kind of need to work with the pixel to make the font one small size to be able to be transmittable, but also legible on that surface. Professor Donna they had this idea about meta font, so you don't have to make the font based on drawing the typeface, and you just type in a whole bunch of numbers and the variables, and it generates a new font for you and give all those variables of curve and counter space and serif and then a stroke and all that. Design practice decks of Sinister really like meta fonts, so they remake the meta font into meta, the typeface, the name called meta, the differences between the two fonts. So they use a lot of meta font in their publications. There's a Chinese meta font too. We're thinking about two languages, bilingual publications. So there's some students I remember in Stanford trying to make this work. I don't think it was a success at the end, but it's a great experiment. You can type in number to generate all these glyphs. But then coming today, that the screen has changed since the 90s, and the type used to be created to be shown better on the digital surface, so digital screen. Now it could appear to be too thin because our monitor, the Retina displays actually can present or can show even sharper on the stroke than a paper. So one last Hollywood blockbuster references like that, that movie called Arrival, the aliens' languages actually look like Chinese calligraphy or paintings. And so we didn't know that. So I think my speculations or our design concept based on the speculation that the future, the typography in the future will not to be something we never seen before, like all this imagination I show in the 80s and 90s and what it need to be. We think in the future, the typography will look like this. It's a mix of everything. It's a residual of the past. So you will have a pixel font, you have a classic serif font, you have the sans look like a meta font, but it's not really meta font. So it's a mix of the styles, and we think that's that could be a representation. That's how I was thinking about how to present something that is in the future. So that kind of typographic system with a mix of different typefaces, both in Chinese and English, that been applied to the text and even caption too, and pull out this kind of contrast with a pixel Chinese font, and then a Garamond classic 19th century serif font. And so some page layout. So the idea was actually the original idea was not have a fixed template. Also thinking about how you make books in the future, you don't need to have a template anymore. Every page could be designed differently, can look different. But to a certain degree, I think we still templatize on some pages, for example, the essays. But this is a good example as I showing that if the poem, this is the poem shown in the book. If the poem was written in Chinese, we'll treat it vertically. That's how the Chinese language will be treated in the ancient form. And if it's written in English, we'll put it in the horizontal way. And so, yeah, like you can see, most of our spread still has some sort of variations in terms of layout. It wasn't follow a strict template. And so this is an example that this poem is originally was written and published mostly on the internet. And so we're gonna add that kind of underlines or overlines to kind of imply that connections. Cool. And at the end, kind of how do we wrap up this whole a variety of a style? So we at the end came up with this kind of an idea that it's just a holographic paper. The cover is printed on a holographic paper, and you look at a different angle. You kind of have a different kind of sheen and then reflect a different type part of you. And so like it's a packaging, the book cover for this book in the future. So that's the second project I'm showing, and then the last project I would like to share is something that going a little bit back in 2013, and so called Intercourses. So this is a quite special project, an exciting project for us at the time that the artist Yes But Yes make this beautiful work called titled Intercourses that been shown in the Danish Pavilion at the 55th Venice Biennial. And so we were, as a studio, we were asked to create a communication campaign for this work. So we can either do, advertisement, logos, or whatever we wanted to do that kind of respond to the work, but also help the Danish Pavilion or the cultural administration and the artists to kind of to tell the world that this work is on in Venice. And so this piece it's quite interesting. He is trying to the whole film was shot in China. And so with all these African French African actors kind of wandering around in this kind of town that it's half ruined but some kind of newly developed buildings, residential building in the background. But they have this replica of Eiffel Tower. So a lot of things can happen in China, which is what is presented here, that the sense of disorientation, that it's about a lot of things, about a lot of segment about longing, about like wandering around, about getting lost. But the Eiffel Tower is always in some sort of way in the backdrop, a replica of Eiffel Tower. And so we're thinking like, why maybe we should start with that. And also, since it's in China, maybe it should be in Chinese. And what we're gonna make, we don't know yet. But let's just try to sketch some typography or some logo type. So we started with this, and as I said, Eiffel Tower in Chinese, it's also called Eiffel Tower. It's a phonetic translation, and so the first character is I. So it's as in Eiffel Tower. So we start to look at this character, and it's like, well, can we do something with it? I think one of our designer that who doesn't speak Chinese, didn't speak Chinese at the time, had this kind of funny observation that saying it's kind of look like an upside down Eiffel Tower. And then and I was like, yeah, that's kind of true. But since we're talking about getting lost and disorientation, what if we turn the actual Chinese character upside down too? And so now you will see a true Eiffel Tower, which is in the film. It's a replica. So a lot of fun things we're trying to play here. And so like this character become a fictional character, and we start to have our designers to design the different form of this character, almost like the typeface, or design a logo type. And so these are two forms we're trying to do. One on the left is kind of more resemble to the classic Chinese printed font, the serif or the song T or the Ming T, how do you call it? But this kind of different forms. So we end up develop 6 different characters, and they are all, as you know by now, upside down fictional Chinese characters that looks like Eiffel Tower. That's how you can do what we come up with. And then at the end, we were like, how do we use this? Why don't we just make posters? And so we take those symbols, the fictional symbols, or fictional characters, and put it on posters, and then send it to 5 different cities in the world. And so these posters have been while posting on the street. And so in some city in New York, we actually hire someone whose job is doing that. So you can just post it. They just show up on the street the next day. And so each city will get a set of posters. But sometimes the rule was established by the designers, but not necessarily be implemented. So you're looking at a New York street that actually have all different type of poster. Otherwise, the New York should only have the green poster, the one with this character. Yeah, here's a good. It does follow the implementation. So it captured the bikers' the attention of these weird symbols. Here, this is in Copenhagen. You can see the man here wasn't very pleased about what he's saying, or he's just confused. This is in Hong Kong, outside of the Jackie Club Auditorium. This is in Paris. It's also kind of just every poster we have. But I'm always kind of surprised at how the cities looks, the global cities look so similar nowadays, even without seeing, Starbucks or McDonald's. The globalization kind of happened in a different level already. But this one, I will never forget which city is this, because the reason why is, if you notice on the post on the far left, so this is in Shanghai. And so apparently the people in Shanghai knows the character should be this way, not this way. And so they kind of follow the rule that designer gave, that you should post the poster this way, but they kind of turn one upside down, that telling us that that's the right way to do it. So I think these projects are kind of reverse chronologically, showing the practice in the almost last 10 years. As this, I hope it communicate we represent our practice that while rooted deeply in typography as a design solution or design approach, but we always try to think about how do we dial up the voice of graphic design, or the design, or how do we assign meanings to different things in the different forms, and that can add it to the provided content or the message we need to communicate. So that's the design part, and this is what I get a little confused about what I talk about when I talk about designing. So I'm gonna share some references, and I hope these references can kind of further explain how we arrive those design solutions, but also what at least I myself particularly are interested in, or constantly research, or constantly kind of obsessed with. And so the first things about like the two different worlds, multiple worlds. So this is from Haruki Murakami's novel, Halfway Wonderland and the End of the World. And so it's talking about this the novel has two parallel worlds, and it's talking about this main characters were living in the 1980s in Tokyo, but has the other dream world that he made it up himself in his mind. And then once he goes into the other side of the world, he cannot come back. And then he kind of like, he is technically died in the real world he lived, but he lived internally in the world he made up. And so this is a diagram, I believe, drawn by Murakami himself, and it's like trying to explain the junctions, and then the point when the junction been switched, then you cannot come out. But in my own experience, I don't think the world works that way, and the switch can be switched on and off by ourselves. And a lot of this is a shipman, so it appears a lot in his novel too, in a different form later on. But a shipman always works or appear as the mediator between the multiple worlds or two worlds. And so if you're confused, the shipman will come out. Shipman is not ghost, shipman is not God, shipman is just shipman. He's a man who wears sheep cloth. But he can tell the characters in the novel what they need to know, or give them some sort of confusing, disoriented advice. And so thinking about design in this way, I constantly kind of trying to pull inspiration from this kind of literature establishment, the world that Murakami built. These things I really like nowadays. This is from a propaganda film in 1944 by the director Frank Capra, And it's part of the sixth film, I believe, that commissioned by American government to make this film to show them to the soldiers, to tell them who are they fighting for. And so this particular episode is about China. And so who are they fighting with at the time? And so I like this angle because it feels like it's from a different eyes to look at the culture or the place I came from. So in this film, they have the portrait of Chinese, and then there are the segment about the Japanese, the Tanaka Memorial, the plan, the strategic plan that how Japan is going to conquer the world. And on the left, you see the Chinese one that use this chop suey font or long-term font. It's showing the Confucius philosophy. And it's always fascinating to me that in certain time period, a specific time with a specific agenda in mind, the graphic representation could be so different. And so, like, you know, even zooming into the Tanaka memorials, the content was typeset in, you know, century or some sort of classic serif. And then for the Chinese, things is more kind of like in a more funky way. Something going back to the mistranslation and translation. So this was something that happened. I really would love to have more time and resources to research about this new script movement. So it originated in the 30s and the border, or actually in Soviet Union in Russia, because there's 100,000 Chinese immigrant workers in Russia at the time who are illiterate, and so the Russian government worked with the Chinese scholars to kind of find a way to be like, how do we educate these people? And then the idea is like, there's too many Chinese characters, so hard to memorize all of them and learn of them. So let's just do this Romanization. Let's Latinize the Chinese. So if I know some, if you speak Chinese, you would think it's a really confusing yet ironic way of speaking the Chinese language. And so without having a Chinese character, we just use Roman alphabet to spell out every word. And so on this page, you see mama means mama globally. RZ means earth, means sun. And then man in English, it means man, but in Chinese, it means door. And so if you try to Latinize or Romanize a language, it becomes something else already existed in another language. And so along with the graphic with the mom and children's and a man, which somewhat imply or connect you to the idea of father or as a family, but it wasn't really that. It actually means door. So political aside, politics aside, I feel like these kind of the historical fact is kind of interesting to think in from the design perspective nowadays. Going back even further, something I really like to look at nowadays is the Chinese calligraphy. I feel like I grow old, 30 years older in 6 months. But I wouldn't say I'm a calligrapher, but I was trying to write calligraphy since I was age of 5. Continue till 15, 16, I believe. And so this is one of my favorite. It's a blockbuster. It's not a very rare one, but to me, it's how it aggressively mix the different kind of styles of writing or scripts, we call it. So something that is the cursive style versus the regular style to something that quite geometric, quite almost modern to a certain extent, but with something that really expressive and kind of wild and free form. And this is in 700 AD, like that's a long time ago. That kind of the plurality that shows here, that like the possibility to use the brushes, but also kind of master different kind of styles, which is quite take some time and practice to do, which I'm always been drawn to. A little bit of the references from music. I don't know how to play music, but this is called the Coltrane Circle. He handed to Yosef Lateef, and Yosef Lateef published in his book in the 80s. So it's basically a diagram of circle of a fifth. And so if you are a musician or you know a little bit of music, you know these are major notes. But what Coltrane was trying to do while being the most kind of innovative or trying musician at the time, he is actually innovative based on a very classic structure. But the way he does it, he just jump around and play different notes, which is supposed to, you're not supposed to do that, because if you do that, you won't sound harmonic, you will sound kind of noisy. But if you do it really quick, then you can kind of get away from that, and it create a different sense of harmony. So I like this, thinking about this, about like, breaking, kind of running on the existing structure or existing framework or the filter you need to go through, but just think about what the design what you can play with it, and also like the massive amount of work you need to do that. It's quite crucial here. Like I said, like in order to play things this quick, to get away from the noise, being the noise, you kind of have to practice really hard. We got to work really hard. So this has always inspired me. The last two things is also things I'm obsessed for years, but haven't really gone deeper. So this is called Beauvais tapestry. This one is in the Met. So it's the in the early 17th century to 18th century that the Europeans start to make all these tapestry that kind of as a portraying what they think about the China should be, or China is. And so this is really funny thing to look at it if you are from that side of the world, if you're from China or Asia. But even from today's perspective, because China doesn't have elephants, China doesn't have this kind of European style of awnings and all that. And then the emperor is darker skin and holding a chopstick that is the size of a stick. So like another deception here, like that being represented in this tapestry, and there's actually a set of there's many of these kind of things, and then there's a set of this in the museum that even more funny, that with like the subject is about one tapestry is about harvesting pineapple. At the time, like pineapple wasn't grown in China, being imported from Caribbean, all that. So, but then this has been as dubbed as like the first form of the chinoiserie, which is like kind of European interpretation of Chinese styles. That it's a visual style. It's a style that been widely applied in decorative art, furniture design, architecture. I heard even in music and performance as well. And so like one world that wasn't quite understand the other world, so they add their imagination to it. They add things that resonate to their own, like what the king looked like in France, should the Chinese king might look like that as well. And it become a wildly popular form, and so the idea of authenticity or like the originality is important. But when the world opened, even in the 18th century, these tapestries or these kind of ceramic or objects being trade or being exchanged between culture, I think a different angles to look at these things could be interesting to think about, especially in the time we live in. Being authentic, it doesn't mean it's higher quality. Being authentic just means you are from there, and so you know how the things are made originally. But taking the styles and apply to develop it or appropriate it. And could create a different kind of meaning. And lastly, this is my last slide. People knows me. I'm obsessed about these giraffe. So these are three paintings. One from left to right. One in the Palace Museum in Taipei. The medium one is in the Museum of Philadelphia, Museum of Fine Art in Philadelphia, and the right is also in the Met. And so this painting are commissioned by Chinese Emperor Yongle in 1414 to document an event of the King of Bengal gifted him a animal, and which is a giraffe, taking a boat and coming from Middle East to China. And so the reason why he does this, because it's rooted in kind of ancient Chinese tradition. It's about this animal called qilin. Qilin kind of, it's one of the 4 sacred animals. And every time if qilin show up in the world, means like a great emperors or great kings is taking the throne. And so this is the sign of a promising, dazzling future. But giraffe is not qilin. It's far away from qilin, except the shape. the neck is way too long, by the way. But it to me, I'd like to look at this in the perspective that thinking about design or visual communication in a way that like we can we're using typography, we're doing graphic design, we're doing compositions, we do web design. We need to say things that need to be said, but also need to look good, the striking. But what if the look is so striking, like a giraffe, or so weird, so strange at the time? You can almost utilize the deception that like this qilin animal means a great emperor, and then but this sign, this giraffe is actually not qilin. But I'm gonna document it. I'm gonna make all this painting about it. I'm gonna show people and tell people this is a good sign. And so I think the something about design or something about visual representation could be further think here. And that's what these are the references I always going back to, or wanted to know more, and then thinking about when I'm working on my design projects, so in my daily design practice. So that's my presentation today. Thank you very much for listening.
Wow, Chris, thank you so much. Both in sharing your work and also like the depth of your thinking around it. It's pretty incredible and comes from so many different places. For the audience, we do have some time for questions. So if you're feeling brave, you can just go ahead and unmute and ask.
Anyone?
Hi, I have a question. This is Ellen. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Ellen. Hi.
Hi. I was really interested in, that you showed both your practical work and then these inspirations that come from history. Are you doing any writing around the historical research, or is that more like a kind of background, just immersion? And I may have missed it if you said I answered this already.
No, you did not miss anything, Alan. Good to see you. No, actually, no. I would love to write more, but I haven't really been doing that. So yeah, I actually have been planning to do more research on, especially the historical part of the references I'm thinking, and then put it into writing. But so far, not yet.
I hope you do.
I have a question kind of, I guess, similar to what Ellen was asking. A lot of your inspiration comes from sort of historical artifacts and artwork and stuff. Where do you find this stuff? Like, is it just sort of in passing that you see these things, or are you like researching at libraries or museums and galleries and stuff like that? I'm just curious.
That's a very good question. I thank you. How do I find this? I like to go to museums. I really like to go to the museum. I mean, it sounds, I don't know if it sounds cool or it sounds old nowadays. I'm a little bit biased now, but I remember when I was a student in Pratt, I collect all the museum admissions tickets I had, and it's massive amount, hundreds. I like to go to museums, so I've seen these things on the walls without knowing what that is, and it come back to me that like I remember these things existed, and a lot of research, a lot of just kind of like you will be surprised at how much things you can actually found online. Like a lot of academia, kind of academic resources that now is actually open for more like a free offering that you can do. And then, all these museums also have their bulletins and then the publications that almost a lot of them kind of largely digitized online. A lot of it also, as I learned when I was a kid, like when in Taiwan, education kind of tell you all this trivia without tell you too much of the details. So I kind of like, it made me kind of wanted to know more, and then I realized that's all wrong, But yeah, I think it's more kind of actively go into research and then find a resource mostly online, but also libraries also quite good resources too. You'll be surprised how fun the libraries in those museums is. A lot of things that people never really touch. But yeah, hope that answers the question.
Thank you.
I also have a question. So it's Jing. So I heard when you're speaking about your works with Guggenheim, and you talk about the future looks like past. When you doing the work, would you think about that question a lot, or it's just because of the project? Could you tell more about that?
Yeah, of course. That's a very good question. Maybe we should go offline with this, but no, I'm just kidding. I think, yes, the answer is yes. I think when we were working on that project, I think that was the main task, like trying to think about how can we do this in the most kind of one way, kind of on brief on the subject, but also we can push the design to a more kind of I wouldn't say, I don't know if aggressive is the right word, but like a little bit different than most of the museum publication would look like. And so that was almost kind of like I think we were trying to simplify the task, or like what's the problem we need to solve here, or what are we trying to do here, and then a book of a future is sort of it's part of the design basically. So to think about like what are we trying to make here is this, then you can go deeper to find that answer. And so yeah, a lot of, I would say, sometimes we do if you really think about design too much or too rationally, sometimes it wouldn't come up with a good outcome. So a lot of way you think about things that you let it flow a little bit, and then people just go back to their desk, myself too, just sketch random things. That was not completely related to the subject matter or I hate to use problem solving word of problem solving, but like not necessarily related to the things we're working on here, but it sometimes can kind of works in certain way. And so I wouldn't say this is the only solution, the only way to design. But yeah, I think in that particular case, we do take that as kind of like a guiding principle. That's like something we just need to come up with.
That's very cool. Yeah, it's very inspired works. Thank you.
Thank you.
I kind of also have another question. So
Mhm.
yeah, because since I'm a second year and I know a bunch of people in at this moment, maybe a senior or doing their thesis. I just want to ask if you have any like suggestion or advice for us doing thesis.
In terms of subject matters or in terms of approach?
Yeah, maybe the process or approach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe.
Hmm.
Mm,
It's a broad question. Let me try to answer it this way. I think you should choose what you are interested to do instead of what you think is right to do or what is going to be better for, you know, for the career or being famous or being cool. I think it's something I think it needs to be something you really have passion on. And it doesn't matter it's on the trend or it's not, or it doesn't matter. I think to me, that's my first criteria. The second, it's a very broad question, but I think, let me put it this way. So are you from, where are you from originally?
yeah, I'm from China.
From China. Okay, so I think the development of Chinese typography, typeface design, or the attention of typography in general, because there's not that much resources or even attentions in the past, even comparing to 5 years or 10 years ago. And now it seems like it's become a thing now. A lot of people are talking about that, either in Chinese or English languages. A lot of corporations and the way of capitalism work. A lot of company focus on that. A lot of custom typeface came out. And I think something about that I would like to see more. I'm not giving a fixed subject or a recommendation, but I feel like it is something that I personally feel I wish there are more information, resources, books, websites, people talking about that, and in a more kind of broader, generous angle. What I meant is, there's a different part of China, there's a different part of Asia, there's people in the United States who speak Chinese wanted to do the same thing. And a lot of time I saw the resources I found or the things I saw, and usually kind of get into some sort of like I mentioned, like idea of authenticity. So I think, more research on that, either it's academic research or interpretation or design, or just work on the Chinese typography, could be a one direction I would like to see more, and then like again more broader and generous and a perspective with a little bit of a world view that yeah, I think that I could say.
Agree. Yeah, I do think about combining the culture. Since I'm here, like I do want to do something related to the my own culture. Yeah, that's really helpful. Thank you.
Chris, we have a question in the chat from Mark. Similar to the misinterpretation in the West of Asia in art, do you see examples in type design or art of the West in Asia?
Yes, great. Thanks, Mark. I would say, I guess this is a very good question. Thanks, Mark, because it's easier for me to say Chinese are misinterpreted in the West in here. Harder for me to say the English was misinterpreted in China because based on where I'm from. But I do, the observation I have over the years also, a lot of students and people had the experience study in the West, either Europe or United States, or have better language background that understand English, and then there's some there'll be some kind of trend that starting with using the knowledge they obtained they learned in the West and going back to China and either heavily criticize what is happening there or starting some sort of a revolution that let's just treat Chinese type in the Western typographic principle with Western typographic principles. So to me, I'm more aware of that, and it's more kind of jumping to my eyes of that, jumping out to me of those interpretations, lesser of a Swiss international style that being misused, and then and all the Chinese or all the English settings and serif and all that. I think to me, I wasn't. It didn't come to my attention as much as the other way around. And the other way around that, introduce certain international rule, Western rules applying to Chinese design, either with Chinese or Western Roman or English languages, and then make it into a way that kind of look like something happening in Europe or in the United States, but not necessarily has clear rationale or reason of doing so.
Chris, I have a question.
Yep.
In two of the examples that you showed this evening, and also in other projects that I've seen of yours, there seems to be this sort of tolerance for change or multiplicity, or that in the cases that you showed, that each artist spread didn't have to relate to the other one. And that seems to be a sort of shift away from thinking about design as really strict structural systems. I was curious just if you have sort of noticed your attitude toward content or the way that you're practicing changing.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think when we talked about this a little bit last time, I think that's a very good question, because you mentioned the word changing. I feels like I have I would say in the beginning or in the early part of my career or the practice in New York, like a dynamic identity or flexible identity. It's something it's almost like, I don't know if we can claim that, but it's been seen a lot in our work. So almost most of identity project we did never have a fixed form. I never have to fix a look, and it's always kind of something will change. And in the books too, in the book, at least coming out from my side, I'm always trying to kind of push that idea of template. And the templates doesn't need to mean the way that, it doesn't have to be that strict. But now I think a lot of designer, I think Yunjun and Casper was here a few weeks ago talking about a lot of outcome of a graphic design. A lot of design we've seen today is actually quite linked directly to the production method. I paraphrasing if I mentioned it wrong, but the idea of to me, the fixed format or the page templates, to me, it derived directly from the limitation of the productions. So in the older days, you need to carve a piece of wood to be able to print. Then you need to pick up metal font. You have to fix into certain sizes and all that. So therefore, we need a template. We need to kind of limit the variations of things. But also in terms of a more kind of Eurocentric idea of design, that things, the modernism means like regulations, rules, simplifies and neutral, and so the less you change, the neutral you could be. And I think, and I was inspired by the couple of things you mentioned too. Like I feel like the world has changed so much. It's not that hard to make 3 different templates than 1 template nowadays. In my opinions, you can put as many master page you wanted to put it in InDesign. And so it's not that difficult to change type size and colors and all that. So I think, to me, I don't want to admit that like the work is being dictated by the production methods, like the easy way of using computer software to modify things. But I do feel like there's the liberty of that, which has been kind of influences in the graphic design history since the desktop publishing system is out in the 90s. There's a liberty of being less limited by the tools you're making, and so there's more possibility you can make. And of course, need to be careful about why do you want to change just for the sake of changing. Yeah, no, I think I need to think further about what my true, like the kind of more conclusive answer. But I do think my ideas about design, the approach about design has changed, and it's a lot of things get influences by what the world has changed surrounding me.
Thank you. Maybe we have time for one last question.
Anything, guys?
Chris, I have a question here.
Hi, yes.
Your work pushes the boundaries of conceptual sort of art and design. How do you strike the balance between marketability, accessibility, and inclusiveness in your design, while still being exciting for yourself and your audiences?
Wow, that's deep. Okay, this one is hard. Yeah, I think I'm always going back to a principle, because to kind of frame the process in more of a kind of artistic way, if I may, it's almost like a self-searching, or the reflection of mind to me. So I feels like my design has followed the trajectory of my life. Therefore, I show in those photos that, like, the fascinating of the Western styles, and Ellen's work. I look a lot in the 90s, and Abler's work. That's one of the reasons I came to New York to study. And then the awaken of, hey, I can do this in my own language after 6-8 years of not doing any Chinese project that involved Chinese language. And then now, again, I'm trying to catch up the world, and I like what you mentioned about how do you make the design more inclusive. And I feel like I want to be extremely careful here, from very different perspective, that I think at the bottom line, the goal is to listen to people, either it's a clients or friends, or it depends on who are you do this for and who are you do this with, and really instead of thinking about what design can do, maybe think more about what design can help. So kind of this kind of separate the role of a designer's ego than the what the project actually is. And I think that will be on the, I think I'll find myself more on the right track of not making something extremely patronizing or extremely taking the colonial languages, or being too highbrow, or doing too much of a translation, a mistranslation, and translated back, and then eventually kind of miss the point. So yeah, I mean like it's a big life task. I always wanted to, and yeah, I love to continue to think about that, especially facing the new world. But I think yeah, the openness of today's the design industry, the today's world, not only design, but the openness of the allowing all different kind of voices and comments and criticism. I think it will eventually help and shape the what we do here.
Well, thank you very much, Chris, for coming and sharing your work, and also for all of those thoughtful answers to the audience questions. And thanks everyone for coming. I also want to acknowledge Maria Sanchez, who created the graphics for today's event. Those were really fun. So do please look out for upcoming announcements on the MICA GD Instagram, starting with Dimitri Teton on Thursday. Thanks again, everyone, for coming. And thank you so much, Chris, for spending your late afternoon, early evening with us.
Great, thanks for having me. Glad to talking to you guys.
Great, thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks very much.
Bye.
Bye.